In 1925, the town of Betty O'Neill, Nevada was booming. The mill scene here had recently been expanded to handle 250 tons of ore per day. At its peak, the town had stores, a post office, a newspaper, and a baseball team. Few traces of the town remain, but the sprawling ruins of the mill are quite impressive. The mill's huge leaning tower really grabs your attention. Sadly, most of the mill burned down several years ago, and unless someone finds a way to prop it up, the ore bin tower will fall over soon. Although the mill and the town around it were built in the 1920s, the history of the mine goes back much further than that. Exactly when the Betty O'Neill mine was first discovered is unclear, but we know from newspaper reports that the first buildings were already being constructed at the mine in 1879. The mine's early years were troubled by labor strikes, a fatal boiler explosion, flooding, and high milling costs. By 1883, the Betty O'Neill mine was deeply in debt, and the mine's machinery was auctioned off in 1885. Over the following years, several short-lived attempts were made to reopen the mine. The mine was finally brought back to life in 1920 after 11 million gallons of water were pumped from the mine's flooded underground workings. "12 side-dump ore cars pulled by a battery-powered locomotive were used to haul the ore directly from the mine to the mill. The ore was first passed through a rough crusher. It was then reduced to 1-inch size by an Alice Chalmers gyratory crusher, the remains of which are seen here. A 125-foot-long conveyor belt moved ore from below the crusher up to the top of the 300-ton ore bin. Only a portion of the conveyor's support structure still stands. The area under the conveyor belt was used as a workshop. Originally, the conveyor belt was enclosed to protect it from the weather, but that part of the structure is gone now. It looks like the enclosure was dismantled when the conveyor equipment was removed. Thanks to my drone, we can get a look at the interior of the shelter at the top of the ore bin. Here's another look at the interior from the north end. Now let's zoom back and get a wider view of the site. From the air, we can see several other interesting features in the area. Near the bottom of the image are the foundations of the power plant. To the left are the ruins of a small wooden building. A little farther up the slope is a concrete bunker. A waste pile from the mine can be seen in the upper left corner. Here's a closer look at the power plant foundations. This plant produced electricity to power both the mine and the mill. Electricity was generated by two Fairbanks-Morris alternators powered by huge Fairbanks-Morris semi-diesel engines. Each of these 6-cylinder engines were rated at 300 horsepower. I'm guessing that the power plant building was dismantled when the equipment was removed, since there is very little debris at the site. The mill's multi-level foundation allowed gravity to aid the process. The crushed ore stored in the 300-ton bin was fed into a series of ball mills where it was mixed with water and ground down to a fine slurry. The ball mills were made by the Joshua Hendy Iron Works of San Francisco. The pulverized ore passed through various devices, including classifiers, agitators, and flotation cells. The highly concentrated ore that resulted from this process was then sent to a drying plant where it was heated and dried by an oil-burning furnace. The dried concentrated ore was bagged and shipped to a smelter in Utah. The quality of the ore began to diminish in 1928, and the mill was reduced to operating intermittently. It finally closed for good in 1932. The mill and its equipment were still intact into modern times. Most of the mill building was destroyed by fire sometime prior to 2008. The mill equipment is gone now. I don't know whether it was removed before or after the fire. Now let's head up to the mine. In 1925, the Betty O'Neill mine was bustling with activity. Now only a few scant ruins and some rusty machinery remain. The mine shaft has collapsed and eroded into a funnel-shaped death pit. The mine got a big boost in 1921 when a rich new vein was found. Another, even richer vein was found in 1926. This is all that remains of the hoist house and compressor building. A handsome little kit fox emerged from the ruins and stared cautiously at me for several seconds before disappearing. It was such a thrill to see this shy creature out in the open during the day. The hoist is gone, but the compressors remain. 2 air compressors made by Chicago Pneumatic supplied the pressurized air needed to operate the drills and the air-driven hoist. The compressors were self-powered, with a single-cylinder semi-diesel engine at one end driving the compressor piston at the other end. This riveted compressed air tank appears to have a crack running the length of the first segment. The compressors are partially buried by soil washed down from the hillside. Square holes in the flywheel allowed a lever to be inserted for turning the engine manually. I don't know what kind of equipment was mounted here. This doesn't look like a typical hoist foundation. There were at least 4 adits on the hillside above the mine shaft. All of the adits have caved in, but you can still see some of the tracks that extended out of the main tunnel. A small wooden ore bin overlooks the mine shaft from the waste pile above it. The ore bin is partially collapsed and falling apart. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Betty O'Neill Mine and Mill in Nevada. Be sure to check out some of my other videos featuring ghost towns, mines, and more.